It is Wednesday, November 7th, 2018. It is 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and so you know what time it is. It's time for a little bit of coin metal. And it was a very interesting get your ass kicked at jiu-jitsu Wednesday. I almost said Friday there. But yeah, we did some interesting stuff today. It was a little bit different pace. The instructor was a little bit newer than the rest, so she was a little bit slower, but nonetheless, we had a really good class. I enjoyed it a lot, and we covered one of my very, very favorite things to cover, because it's the one thing I always end up getting fucking trapped in, and that was armbar escapes. And we did a wide variety of them. I still ended up getting armbarred by Chemo. The dude is badass. And I know he wasn't even trying. If he was trying, if he was doing anything other than just being technical, I'd have been fucking toast. I know this. You know this, man. But yeah, nonetheless, I did manage to stall him from armbarring me the rest of the time. He only armbarred me once during the few minutes that we were going at it. But just the same, I felt better about my escape. When I was working with only mildly, well, I shouldn't say only mildly. I was trying to flatter him, but because everybody needs encouragement and whatever, and he did an awesome job, but he wasn't as good in Chemo. He didn't, nowhere near. Anyway, my other opponent, while we were doing positional sparring, we were actually starting off from halfway to Fucksville in the armbar position. Where they got the arm hooked, they got their legs over you, over your head, and over over the torso, and so it was one of those things where you're pretty. You've got an option of which grip you can try to assume at that point, and hopefully you've already got one by the time your opponent's got you there. I mean, because if you don't, you're all the way to Fucksville, or at least 3/4 of the way. Because if they want to jerk back on you, that's Dunsky. There's no. If somebody knows how to pop that arm up, you forget about it. They're gonna get you. But anyway, so yeah, we were doing some interesting guard escapes. I mean, not guard escapes, armbar escapes. And I did find too that I tend to apply on a relatively regular basis. And one of them, I'll just describe it a little bit, is like you hold your arms in like a rear naked choke position, but instead of your hand being on the back of their head, it's behind their knee. And what you do is you bring your knees in, and then you rock forward, and if you can, swing your legs out from under you and push them over. I really like that one, and it's one that has tended to work the most for me. And I've even found a trick to make it work a little bit better if you're having trouble getting rolled over. If you can get them up on their hip and get to where you can like see the ground when you're looking at it. If you were to look at the ground, you got them up on their hip a little bit. One thing I like to do at that point is take my leg and put it over one of their feet. If you can get it over the outside foot, that's cool. But I really like getting it over the inside foot, because then you just thrust into their hip, or into their hamstring with your shoulder, and push open their legs. And then you can get like a knee slider, or a staple their leg down with your foot, and by hooking it over, and then sneak out to the outside. I kind of like that. Either that, or if you do get it open that far, then reaching up and grabbing the inside of the outside knee, pushing it down to get it off of your shoulder, and going around for the back. I really like that one, because it's like a crushing thing. Especially, I like to make good contact and keep good contact. I need to work on my pressure game, though. I have a tendency to either fall to my knees or my hips really quick, and I got to keep up on my toes more. because that's a big issue for me, is getting anchored at all. You know, I have a tendency to not be very fleet on my foot, or fleet on my feet rather, and so, you know, I like I said, I tend to be pressure oriented. I want to put the weight on you. I want you to not like where you are, so you make a stupid mistake and I get a hold of your arm or something, you know. But I did a few adaptations on what we were learning today, and most of them I've already done. You know, it was just my body kind of re-exploring the same positions, except instead of being under extreme duress of my opponent really trying to get my arm, I had the opportunity to explore the position a little more. And the good thing about that is it does give you an opportunity to see exactly where you are and find out what other options are available that really didn't come to mind immediately. And, you know, getting those to actual practice, though, that's really the trick. You can work edge cases all day long, but if you're not being put into a position where you're actually needing to utilize it, you're kind of wasting your time. But I could definitely see the positions that we were working on today being something that I need to drill for like a year, you know, or two. Maybe 2 good years of drilling that, and then they won't get me any arm bars anymore. or at least only the higher belts will only get me in arm bars. I'm sure there's a few people in my gym that'll still get me in arm bars anyway. But, you know, I can at least eliminate some people off of the list, if not everybody. At least narrow it down to a small, tiny, finite few that can actually threaten my arms. Anywho, as far as where we're going to go with music today, I haven't picked anything out as usual because, you know, I like to fly it by the seat of my pants here. And as far as what we're going to talk about, got a shit ton of tabs, but I haven't gotten in any like coherent order yet, so we're still working on that. And by the time we get there, I'm sure I'll have it down. And as far as what we're going to do for our first dance, it's a fucking crazy world out there. Let's go institutionalize 2014 by body count here on Coin Metal. And that was Prong with Snap Your Fingers, Snap Your Neck. Yeah. And so as far as what we're going to get into today, I haven't had much opportunity to actually sort it out. But we do have a ton of stuff. This one I was kind of thinking about getting into, but this one was also an interesting one too. Why not? Let's get into this one. I got one here from swissinfo.ch. FINMA sets tough restrictions on bank Bitcoin trading. And this by Matthew Allen. And FINMA, I believe that's the Swiss gig. Alright, continuing on. Crypto assets like Bitcoin should be risk-weighted at 8 times their market value when banks calculate loss-absorbing capital buffers, according to a confidential letter from the Swiss financial regulator seen by swissinfo.ch. The Swiss Financial Market Supervisory Authority, FINMA, has taken no official position on how to merge crypto assets into Basel III capital requirements or liquidity ratios, but a letter to Expert Suisse, an association representing Swiss trustees and accountants, reveals the regulator's current thoughts on the issue. Quote, FINMA has recently received an increasing number of inquiries from banks and securities dealers holding positions in crypto assets and are subject to capital adequacy requirements, risk distribution, regulations, and regulations for the calculation of short-term liquidity ratios. The letter, dated October 15th, starts. Until the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision makes global recommendations, FINMA is advising financial players that crypto assets should be, quote, assigned a fiat risk weight of 800% to cover market and credit risks. And you know what? I suspected we covered this one the other day, and I think we actually have. I don't want to continue doing that one. But it is kind of interesting that they're requiring capital requirements of 800% of their holding of cryptocurrency. And what I find funny about that is this, that with cryptocurrency, they could actually hold the cryptocurrency for you and easier than if they were holding physical bills for you, right? But requiring the bank to hold on to 800% of the fiat, the amount in fiat, that's really stupid. I mean, just because if a cryptocurrency goes up in value, it's going to be going up in value versus a fiat currency. So if you're requiring that kind of weight of fiat, you're anticipating that they're going to go up in value 800% versus the fiat units that you have, and at any time. I mean, that could get kind of expensive for them if Bitcoin did another one of those spikes where it shot up over $20,000 a piece. That would wreck a lot of banks, because all of a sudden they'd have to be holding $80,000 for every one Bitcoin, or no, I'm sorry, $160,000 for every one Bitcoin that they had. So I mean, imagine that. That's quite a risk. Anyway, I didn't want to continue to go on that one. I really should have closed that one. God damn it! I want to sign up. Keep ad blocker on. There. This was the real meat that I wanted to get into today. I mean, I do have other stuff that I want to talk about, but that one specifically I definitely want to get into. And this one seems kind of interesting too. And it's funny because we've been talking a lot about how cryptocurrency mining is sucking up a lot of the chips out there and kind of forcing ahead a lot of the development of chips. And here we have something going on with chips, and I can only wonder about what the source of the issue is here. And other than, of course, we're going fucking broke and we can't afford to upgrade to the next iPhone. This is certainly a possibility. Anyway, here it is. This is on Bloomberg. Qualcomm gives weak forecast on loss of Apple iPhone orders. And this is authored on November 7th, 2018. Qualcomm Inc., the biggest... Oh, I'm sorry. And this is by Ian King. And this was authored 1 p.m. PST. So it was West Coast. Very good, Ian. So yes, penis. Qualcomm Inc., the biggest maker of chips used in smartphones, gave a tepid sales forecast for the current quarter, underscoring the fallout from a legal dispute that prompted Apple Inc. to stop placing orders earlier this year. The company's earnings and outlook provide a window into demand for products made by some of the world's biggest technology companies, such as Samsung Electronics Co. and Huawei Technologies Co. or Hui. I don't know how to pronounce that. Qualcomm said demand was lower in general, but expects to reverse in the second half of next year as new 5th generation or 5G phone services and networks are deployed. Actually, I heard there's a bit of controversy with 5G, that there's some sort of issue with it. I'm not 100% on that. Anyway. Key insights: first quarter sales will be $4.5 billion to $5.3 billion, the San Diego-based company said in a statement Wednesday. That compares to the average estimate from analysts of $5.56 billion, according to data compiled by Bloomberg. 2. Adjusted earnings per share will be 105 to 115 a share. Analysts had projected profit of 93 cents. Qualcomm's chip business had sales of $4.6 billion in the fiscal fourth quarter. Its licensing unit, which provides the bulk of corporate profit, had sales of $1.14 billion. The company had strong demand for its chips in China in the fourth quarter. Chief Executive Officer Steve Mollenkopf said in an interview following the announcement. Yeah, I don't want to continue to go through all that stuff. I was hoping this is an actually more article, but yeah, it's kind of interesting to see how the chip market is actually flowing. And there was another thing in here I wanted to get into that I thought kind of related to this. And that's definitely something we're going to get into here. And that one we may get into. Oh, Jesus Christ. But we're not going to deal on the Wall Street Journal. Ooh. That might be one we're getting into. Get rid of that one. Yes, I think this is the one I wanted to get into. Yes. And I'd like you guys to pay attention to the specs that we're talking about with regard to this. This is on Coindesk.com. Bitmain to begin selling new Bitcoin miners later this week. This is authored by Nicholas D. And on November 6, 2018 at 5:15 UTC. Bitmain is launching 2 new Antminer models targeting the Bitcoin mining industry. The crypto hardware manufacturing giant announced Tuesday that the new Antminer S15 and T15 machines will be powered by its recently revealed 7nm ASIC application-specific integrated circuit processor and will go on sale on November 8th, tomorrow. The new miner, quote, poses industry-leading hash rates designed to mine with the SHA-256 algorithm, according to a tweet from the company. The 7nm chip was first announced in late September by Bitmain CEO and co-founder Jihan Wu, who said it would be more energy efficient and powerful than older models. While these specs for the chip haven't been released in full, Wu said during his original announcement that it would include, quote, more than 1 billion transistors and achieve a ratio of energy consumption to mining capacity that is now as low as 42 joules per terahash. Details on the new Antminers are also sparse, with a holding page on the company's website offering no information at press time. Bitmain's announcement comes amid its push to raise funds via an initial public offering. The company officially filed for an IPO at the end of September, although pitch decks obtained by Coindesk indicate some investors may have seen false information regarding the company's funding status. Funding attempts aside, the company's new processor will compete with a number of other Bitcoin-focused ASICs, including a new 14nm chip announced the day before by Bitfury. Dubbed the Bitfury Clark, the company's latest product similarly claims to boost power efficiency, specifically for the SHA-256 algorithm as used by cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. In related news, Bitfury revealed earlier today that it's just closed an $80 million funding round that saw Mike Novogratz's Galaxy Digital investing. Yeah, there you have it. So some are going down to 7nm and some are going out at 14nm. Now, I've heard there's some sort of discrepancy there with regard to the the performance of the chips and the actual dimensions of them as far as efficiency is concerned. Like I'd read an article about I think it was a product by Samsung or Intel. No, it was by Intel. That it was a 10 nanometer chipset, or 10 nanometer spec chipset, but they were saying that it was beating the efficiency standards of a 7 nanometer chipset. So it's a matter of design and the dimensions. Not just the dimensions, but also the layout of the chip and its energy utilization or electricity utilization or whatever. But the point being that these are kind of things that throw off all of the estimates about how much mining is, how profitable mining is. When you're talking about multiple different chipsets by multiple different companies that are getting their electricity from multiple different sources, it's really hard to hammer down exactly what the energy consumption of Bitcoin mining will be for any duration of time. Whether we're talking about a week, a month, a day, a year, 10 years. It's impossible to extrapolate that kind of shit, just because, again, look at all of the innovations that are happening in such a short period of time. I mean, I just read something the other day that they found some key way to transmit over broadband, and it bolstered the efficiency of broadband by like 10 times or some shit like that. You can't account for that on a linear or even a logarithmic chart. You can't account for that kind of shit. I mean, that's Moore's law happening in like 80 different directions. It's happening on your manufacturing for your chips. It's happening on the efficiency of the chips. It's happening on the efficiency of the bandwidth, on the transmission of electricity, on the efficiency of solar panels. All of these things have Moore's law pushing them, or at least being reflected by their improvements in performance over time. And it is kind of an observational thing. It's not even... It doesn't even fit according to what Moore's law proposes. And yeah. Anyway, it's with that in mind that I wanted to read this next article, because I think any kind of long-term projection or extrapolation of what we think is going to happen tomorrow, forget about it. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. The best you can do is try and plan, and go with what you do know. Like you do know that Moore's law is in operation behind you, and so wherever you put your feet down, you got to be planning on where you're going to put your next foot down. Before you even touch ground with your foot. Anyway, continuing on. This is on theentrepreneur.com. Bad news day for Bitcoin. It's destroying the world and bank accounts. You won't believe how much energy it takes just to get $1 worth. And this is by Nina Zipkin, entrepreneur staff. And when was this thing authored? Let's check and verify that. Oh, it was November 6th. Amazingly enough, I bet you anything she just read that fucking Nature report, that 3-page or 5-page bullshit that we read on the show the other day. Anyway, let's get into it. Even though cryptocurrencies technically have no physical presence, they really do make an impact on the environment, and even could affect the amount of money people have in their accounts. From January 2006 to June 2018, the Oak Ridge Institute for Science and Education in Cincinnati monitored how much energy it took to mine Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, and Monero on a daily basis. The researchers found that Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, and Monero respectively consumed 17 million, 7 million, 7 million, and 14 million joules of electricity to get $1 worth of each cryptocurrency. When you compare that to how much energy it takes to mine precious metals, the difference is pretty stark. For example, Bitcoin takes 3 times as much energy to mine gold. And no, that's actually a lie, because you're not even considering all of the technology and all of the energy put into just acquiring the fuels that you use to dig the fucking gold out of the ground. Continuing on. Bitcoin takes 3 times as much energy to mine than gold. For copper, you need 4 million joules. For gold, 5 million joules. And platinum requires 9 million joules to get $1 worth of the precious metals. While those figures might give you pause, this week also saw Bitcoin being used for some nefarious ends. Publisher Pantheon Books had its Twitter account hacked and was made to look like Elon Musk's personal account. A tweet was sent out saying that the Tesla and SpaceX CEO was going to give away 10,000 Bitcoin, which amounted to $64 million, to people who deposited anywhere from 0.1 Bitcoin, $640, to 2 Bitcoin, a whopping $13,000, into a provided account. In just a few hours, hackers had swindled more than $150,000 with 326 transactions. The fraud was discovered and Twitter is apparently on the case, but it just goes to show that even if something seems abstract, it could have significant real-life implications. And you can tell by reading this article that Nina has never used a cryptocurrency in her entire life. I mean, if she had, she would understand a lot of the flaws that are inherent in the arguments comparing cryptocurrency mining to mining gold or other precious metals. As I had mentioned, you have energy involved in mining gold. That includes drilling for oil, refining or transporting the oil to a refinery, refining the oil into gasoline, and then transporting the gasoline to the gas pump for you then to pump it into your tank and then go mine gold with it. Now, if you consider all of that cost into the mining of gold, it's a lot more expensive than mining cryptocurrency, and it costs the rest of us a lot more than cryptocurrency mining does, even with the noise component involved. And there is, from what I understand, and from my own experience, okay, both times that I was mining, I had to deal with this fucking fan. It was a nice white noise to go to sleep to, but it got kind of boring after a while, But anyway, the point being that the costs associated with cryptocurrency mining are so much lower than they are for just transporting paper money around. And this was something that VergeDev brought up. I didn't even think about it until he mentioned it. But there's actual energy consumed in transporting US dollars around. The paper units have to go from one place to another, right? They have to go from the Federal Reserve or the Treasury or the place that printed it, whatever. What's the name for that? Mint that printed up the paper. Whichever print made the coin, transporting it from there to a bank, to the stores, and then back again, that takes energy. And when you consider that versus how much energy it takes to transmit Bitcoin, that's where the savings really takes place. When you consider the costs associated with transmitting even US dollars, it's far more expensive still per cent, per $0.01 per cent to transmit around US dollars than it does for Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency mentioned in this article. So I think that's one of the places where these arguments fall on their ass, is that they operate on the assumption that the energy that was utilized in mining gold and whatnot already existed, and therefore there was no cost associated with it, right? It's just like because it was available to everybody it's a constant. It's not actually constant though, because price of it goes up when the price of gas goes up. the price of everything associated with gas goes up. And that's one of the other points where these people miss it, is that energy more and more is being derived from renewable resources such as wind and solar. And while there are some material costs associated with the production of those things and the maintenance of them and the upgrade of them, when compared over the longer term, they're fractions of what they replace as far as energy. If it wasn't derived from solar electricity or hydroelectricity or what do you call it? What's it? I keep wanting to call them fans, but that's not it. Wind. There you go. Wind generated electricity. There are material costs associated with maintenance and construction, but when you consider them versus the energy costs associated with drilling the oil out of the ground and rending it and refining it and then burning it, it's a fraction of the cost. So like I said, that's actually the third stage of Bitcoin mining. We're not even fully through stage one, which is just distribution. And actually the stage I was talking about is actually fourth. Distribution is one, and we're still going through that, where we're trying to ferret out the cheapest electricity that we can get, closest to our mining facilities, closest to the production of the mining chips, so on and so forth. Those are all associated costs, And so the next step, the second phase of mining after we sort out distribution, and actually I think distribution is going to continually change. There are people that have been trying to winnow it down to where there's only a small number of people that are actually doing the mining, and the rest of us are just piggybacking on their work. And I think that's the wrong kind of thinking. For one thing, I don't think it's sustainable over the long term. I think invariably they're going to cheat to their own advantage. They're going to corrupt the process, and we're either going to have to A, continue living with the lie, or B, resolve ourselves to the idea that it's a failed experiment and we need to pull stakes, exchange for a better coin, and get back to what Bitcoin was meant to do, which was to put the processing of transactions in our hands instead of handing it off to a third party, a trusted third party, who will invariably abuse that trust. But anyway, the second stage of mining development, or evolution as I like to think of it, is where miners themselves are taking a look at their local infrastructure for electricity and internet, and they're going the step further in making investments and improving these two things in order to lower their own costs. And within that is going to be, I think, in the longer term, is going to be a drive for that to be put into the hands of the people again, to where we're either eliminating or just not bothering to try and license people to mine. And I think that's going to be a temptation at some point in the future too, where some places are going to make you get licensed in order to mine. And I think that the areas that try it, they're going to find out that they end up with centralization, and that the centralized party will end up abusing their centralized position, and then we'll get broken back down again and decentralize. But it's not going to happen everywhere. It's only going to happen in one or two places. They're going to figure out that's not really a good idea, and then they're going to drop it. The better approach, of course, is to just not bother trying at all and just keep it hands off. The municipalities that have required application for permits for that kind of activity, they're going to stop doing that, Because mining, I believe that mining is going to become smaller and more diffuse, and it's going to be something like PC ownership. Where everybody who has a desktop today is probably going to have a couple miners humming away in the garage or in some closet or some shit like that. But that the practice of mining will be a far more publicly shared thing. And I think that's going to be like the end of the second evolution of mining. The third evolution of mining, again, will be whatever big miners are still available and are still sprouting up, are going to be investing in the development of better internet technologies. Better ways to transmit their transactions around receiving and sending. And we're seeing that to some extent from Blockstream and a few others, where they're saying, hey, we want to deploy some satellites so we can just get free of all this ground-based bullshit and be able to maintain a framework that is globally distributed and accessible. And I think that is a way it will go, but I think that, again, it's going to have to be a lot more diffuse and spread out than just in the hands of a few people. That's one of those points that can be definitely abused, unless, of course, we all get access to space, where you can step out in your backyard and get in your craft and hover off to the stratosphere, Anyway, let's go ahead and throw back down into some music, Feeling the Need. And I've got some Testament on here, but I just don't play enough of it. I just don't. I need more, honestly. There's a lot of Testament albums that I do not have, and I'll need to resolve that at some point or another. Let's go practice what you preach here on Coin Metal. And that was Anthrax with Antisocial. And I felt it was obligatory to play that one today, just because I saw a post on my Twitter feed concerning that album, and apparently it's like the 30th anniversary of its release or something like that. I don't remember the exact details on it. I think that's about right, though. Anyway, I said it was a revolutionary album, and Anthrax actually liked my tweet, and so I wrote in response that I thought Persistence of Time was better. I mean, I will not deny State of Euphoria, fantastic album. As a matter of fact, for its year, I would say it was probably one of the best produced albums. And certainly one of the best produced albums to date. I mean, if you were to put that album up against anything you hear on the radio, it would stomp it into the ground. I mean, Who Cares wins. That's just as pertinent today as it was back when they originally put that one out. If not more so, as there are a great deal more veterans on the streets of America now than there were back when they wrote that one. Anywho, I want to get into some other stuff that I got here on my browser. Get out of that one because that's not really necessary at this point, but this one is, and I think this one's kind of really interesting. We just had an election here in the United States, and this one I will be very interested to see how it plays out. In all honesty, I'm terribly interested, honestly. It's on ccn.com. California midterms see largest U.S. state elect pro-Bitcoin governor. And this is authored 4 hours ago. No indication of the specific author. Gavin Newsom is considered to be, quote, pro-Bitcoin. Certainly he is willing to accept Bitcoin for campaign contributions. He also has a record of being pro-technology in general, believing the government should be, quote, performance-based, and that government information and services at every level should be thoroughly digitized, enabling citizens to conduct business with public agencies online. California's new governor has accepted Bitcoin donations. Most importantly, he's now the governor of California. This means that one of the most influential people in the most populated state, with the largest technology sector in the United States, is friendly to the cause of Bitcoin. This alone is cause to celebrate, maybe. But it doesn't mean the Democratic politician is necessarily all in for the various stances that many, though not all, cryptonauts hold the right to privacy, low if any taxes, and so forth. Congratulations to early Bitcoin adopter Gavin Newsom being elected governor of California. Apparently that was a tweet. I should promote the technology ever so subtly by saying I'll accept Bitcoin in the campaign. I'm ready for it, but how the hell do I explain it to anybody? That was a tweet, I guess, in 2014. It's no secret that California, particularly Northern California, is home to the largest technological and financial technology innovation companies in the world. Coinbase, based in San Francisco, is probably relieved to have a Bitcoiner in the governor's mansion. The California BitLicense proposal died in the legislature in January. Thank God. And with pro-Bitcoin governor now holding sway, it would be harder to get such restrictive bills signed into law. I should certainly hope so. Following in New York's footsteps is the dumbest fucking thing a state governor could do. Continuing on. Freedom to participate and innovate is crucial for the growth of a cryptocurrency economy, and while other states may be focused on collecting fees and restricting the activities of crypto exchanges and other types of crypto businesses, California is still free from overly restrictive laws like the BitLicense in New York. Colorado also gets Bitcoiner in the governor's mansion. Jared Polis, newly elected governor of Colorado, has frequently spoken of the benefits of the blockchain. He specifically advocates making Colorado a, quote, safe harbor for Bitcoin companies. Similar to Wyoming, I will work alongside the legislature to create a statewide safe harbor designed to exempt cryptocurrencies from state money transmission laws, and I will work to establish legislation that protects, quote, open blockchain tokens or cryptocurrencies that are exchangeable for goods and services. These moves could allow our state to attract innovative companies and allow them to engage freely in them as issuers, exchanges, wallet providers, without the licensing requirements of the multitude of securities and currency laws. Colorado can pave the way into the future and implement safeguards here at home with the hope that the federal government can catch up to our progress. These ideas, while bold, will put Colorado on the map for fostering new technology and experimenting with the best way to implement safeguards here at home and across the nation. Polis was the first U.S. representative to ever accept Bitcoin as a campaign contribution. He didn't spend long in Congress before vying for the governor's seat, and now he's won, meaning that Bitcoiners in Colorado may find themselves in a specifically friendly environment to begin doing various types of blockchain business, legally with limited interference at the behest of the government. Yeah, so I think that these pushes for safe harbor, specifically in California, should be read as a potential kind of Trojan horse kind of gig, where they or like a bear trap kind of thing, where they tempt you in with the meat and then they slam the thing shut on you and break your neck. But yeah, I think it's a positive thing that we are starting to see the voice of cryptocurrency being heard directly in the governor's seat. I think that kind of change here in the United States is probably the best chance that governments have to properly participate in cryptocurrencies. And I think that the open stance that the Colorado and Californian governors have both displayed thus far, while it could be just bait to sucker people in, because these are both tax intensive regions of the country. You know, they like their taxes in Colorado and California, so you know the possibility of losing significant revenues to cryptocurrencies, it may over the longer term appear threatening to them, and even a pro-Bitcoin governor might be looking at it and saying, okay, well, these are the pressure points that we can put third-party regulators in there and hammer down on this thing and tax everything. Now, I think also the lack of real effort on the part of both governors to try and hammer down on this stuff, like Washington State had no problem whatsoever trying to pass that shit. They're like, what? Somebody other than really rich people might get rich on it? Fuck that. We got to ban that shit. You know, they certainly did that in New York. They're like, fuck all you people. We don't want you to get rich. We don't want to compete with you. You might displace a few of us. Yeah, we're definitely going to displace you all. It's just going to take a little longer than we had anticipated, that's all. At least in New York. But I think what's really going on also with regard to California and Colorado, their governors taking this kind of backseat approach, I think as much as anything, it's probably the realization that any real monies dedicated to trying to regulate it will both limit participation in their states, which is generally bad, and it'll also inspire people to circumvent them. And the more pressure they put on us, the more effort that we'll put towards circumventing them. And there's this realization, I'm sure, that it's a cat and mouse game, and one you're not going to win. There are far more of us than there are of you. So, you know, even with as few people participating in cryptocurrencies as a percentage of the total population, we're picking up more people every day, and I think that this shift in monetary prioritization, you know, where we're not looking specifically to a governing entity to issue us our currency to transact in anymore. I think that's a growing trend, and I think that it will continue on into the future. It's kind of obvious. And this is another example where, you know, people are coming to terms with the fact that trying to regulate cryptocurrencies really is similar to the mad quagmire faced through most of the 60s through 80s. You know, and we had a little bit of it in the 90s, and even a little bit of pressure to try and return to that now in the 21st century. But I think this new dynamic, I think, is going to shift the prioritization away from trying to exert force via guns and militaries, and more in trying to enable your people to conscribe themselves and participate on a fucking global level in this new market and represent your country. You know. Anyway, this one's on bitcoinmagazine.com. Canada delays regulation of cryptocurrencies and blockchain companies. And just to give you guys a little context, this is the same government that back in, I want to say 2014, 2015, was on the verge of throwing down the hammer and just putting a kibosh on the whole thing. They had no idea how to respond to it. And there were a few individuals, and Andreas Antonopoulos, amazingly enough, being one of them, that advised them on this, and they took a much more deliberative approach after this review period that they bothered to go through. But since then, they've been playing this cat and mouse game with cryptocurrencies. You know, are we going to limit them? Are we going to let it open up? And so yeah, here we go. This is by Jesse Wilms, authored on August 28th. What? Fuck you. Why the hell did this come up in my feed? That is so weird. That is so fucking weird. Anyway, I wanted to go into that one, but we're not going to go into that one because it's fucking old. Not going to do it. Anyway, maybe they're just not updating shit on here. I mean, because that's kind of weird. Anyway, but they do have something on Andreas Antonopoulos here. Let's go into that one. Revolutions and Counter-Revolutions. Andreas Antonopoulos reflects on 10 years of Bitcoin. And this one's by Colin Harper, Associate Editor, Staff Writer, November 7th, 2018, at 11:48 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you very, very much, Colin, for bothering to indicate that. So yes, penis. As Bitcoin approaches its 10th anniversary, its community, old and new, has begun taking stock of how a decade has come to alter or define the cryptocurrency, and what Bitcoin has done to alter or define the decade. 10 years has invited room for undeniable change. Bitcoin has seen roughly half a dozen market cycles, spawned a secondary market of more than 2,000 altcoins, and laid the foundations for a surging blockchain industry. It has evolved from the obscure interest of cypherpunks to crypto anarchists to a viable private currency that has provided a financial lifeline to underbanked, underprivileged populations in floundering economies. Soon to be near you. There are a few voices so well equipped to reflect on the changes as Andreas Antonopoulos, one of Bitcoin's chief evangelists and arguably the most vocal educator. Antonopoulos has spent years following his industry entrance in 2012, traveling around the world to share his knowledge on the subject. His books, which include Mastering Bitcoin, The Internet of Money, Volume 1 and 2, the forthcoming Mastering Ethereum, are praised as some of the space's most thorough and informative reads. His impact on the space is something of a widely recognized truth, one that has made him one of the industry's most respected and definitive thought leaders. While others are getting rich, he was enriching the community, reminding others that Bitcoin is about much more than Lambos and moon memes. As a testament to his influence, the community rewarded him with donations amounting to about $1.6 million during the last bull run, upon learning that he had little, if any, Bitcoin. There's just no excuse for that, man. In the following interview with Bitcoin Magazine, Antonopoulos reflects on the metamorphosis of the ecosystem that the ecosystem has undergone, the lessons learned from these myriad changes, and why, after 10 years of challenge, the ethos of Bitcoin itself has doggedly persisted. This interview is part of Bitcoin Magazine's retrospective series for Bitcoin's 10th anniversary, starting from the white paper's birthday on October 31st, 2018, to Bitcoin's launch on January 3rd, 2019. We'll be publishing a series of interviews, op-eds, and think pieces that reflect on where we've come from, where we are, and where we're going. Bitcoin Magazine. Just going straight into it, what has changed? Antonopoulos. So many things have changed. Where do I start? Back in the day when I first got involved, this was a very small community, a very tight-knit community, a very focused community. There was a lot of commonality of purpose, and it felt very tight-knit. And I remember at the time, the main thing I wanted to explain and persuade people about was that this was bigger than payments. This isn't just PayPal, this is bigger than that. And it's not just a payment network. Although I would differ in opinion with Mr. Antonopoulos. That is by far the most significant of the things that Bitcoin is. It is more than just a network, but I'm not going to go into that. Anyway, continuing on. And so in order to express that, I said it's a platform. You've got to think of this not just as Bitcoin, but broader. The blockchain. That backfired badly. I wanted to broaden it a bit to give people vision, but what happened then over the next 3 years was that people took hold of the word blockchain, rammed it right over, and threw everything and the kitchen sink in there. A lot of things that have nothing to do with it. So, in 4 years, I came full circle and released a talk called Blockchain versus Bullshit, which is my #1 talk. And deservedly so. You know, there's this thing that Andreas kind of leaves out when he's talking about, or left out originally, and kind of leaves out even here. And it's the most important part about cryptocurrencies, and that's participation. I keep saying this over and over and over again, and one of these days people are actually going to hear me. I think they are, because the hashing power just keeps going up, so it tells me that participation is still increasing. Continuing on. So are you talking about the altcoin ecosystem? Andreas, even broader than that. The distributed ledger technology, private blockchain, bank chain, business as usual, slap a word on it, quote, pretend it's decentralized when it's not, type of ecosystem. Trying to embrace, extend, and diverge, derail even, this industry by hijacking it, subsuming it completely. At the first conferences, even the first 2013 conference I went to, the suits had shown up, and I was beginning to get that vibe. By the end of 2013, when the 4th or 5th bubble happened, and the price hit $1,000, that's when the suits really descended. So it felt like a tight-knit community, and then the sharks started circling around, and they were all trying to grab a bit of this grand phenomenon and monetize your influence. And there was all of this shitty, disingenuous fake, hey, I've got a product, we're going to revolutionize real estate, we're going to revolutionize exchanges, we're going to revolutionize medicine. And most of it's bullshit. Most of it's completely naked profiteering. Absolutely correct. So I had to turn it around and refocus it to try to figure out what is real, what is the real killer app, what are the real things that are happening. And I just like to say at this point, you've already passed it, dude. You've decided to look past money, and that is the fucking killer app. It's not money created by a central bank. It's not money created by a fucking government. It's created and maintained by people. Average fucking people. That is the killer app. That is the differential. That is what makes it better than third-party provided currencies. Continuing on. And did you come to the conclusion that it is Bitcoin? Andreas, it's not necessarily Bitcoin. It's about decentralized money and other decentralized things. But of course, the core is decentralization. And money is a killer app in itself if it's decentralized. So that changed. The other thing that changed was that one of the things that attracts people to this space is the fact that it gives them the feeling of belonging to this kind of adventure. That goes against the grain. That is outside the mainstream, that is niche, and a bit of feeling that we're the underdog fighting the great forces. But, as always happens in movements like that, eventually you get divisions within, and then you have people who are fighting as the quote underdogs against the establishment Bitcoiners. Like suddenly Bitcoin is establishment, and people will say, hey, this is Bitcoin too. This is better than Bitcoin. This is an alternative chain that solves all the problems in Bitcoin. So then you have a fragmentation, a splitting within the Bitcoin community. No, you just have people thinking that they are more important than Bitcoin itself and think they can do better. And you know what? That's what keeps this space going, is people thinking they can do better. Continuing on. So do you see this space as cannibalizing itself? Because some people feel the need to be the underdog and always be fighting something that drives their personalities. So it's funny because when you're fighting, what you're fighting for is suddenly getting recognition, and IBM is doing it and whatever. The people who are insiders are now part of it. And this is Bitcoin Magazine. You have to find a new machine to rage against. Andreas, exactly. And that's what's happened in the crypto space. So now there's all this fragmentation, all these internal battles, both within Bitcoin, but also between Bitcoin and other systems and between themselves. No sooner had Ethereum raised its fists like, quote, we'll replace Bitcoin and the flippening will happen, then before you know it, they were looking over their shoulder because there are 5 wannabe Ethereums that are like, Ethereum's the old guard, we want to be the solution. So it's the Trotsky phenomenon. The counter-revolution starts within weeks of the revolution. Some revolutionaries can never settle down, and that's not bad. Having principles, being ideological, having political conviction. A lot of people see this as aggression, kind of disingenuous behavior, but honestly, I see a lot of these people who I've known for the past 4 years who are raging against the new machine. I think they're acting mostly in good faith. To play on these dualities you've been talking about, it's fighting a two-front war. In some regards, it's fighting against a front of outsiders, and it's kind of fighting a war against itself. Andreas, yes, which is typical. It's human behavior. Ironically, to the outsiders, we're all one bunch of weirdos. They don't differentiate between the more business-friendly weirdos or the less business-friendly weirdos. We're all weirdos. Because the system exists, it's been running for a few hundreds of years, and you're not going to come and change it. Of course, that's what every system that got changed says. There's a simple way out of this. At some point, there is going to be a massive backlash. At some point, quote, the system that we're disrupting is going to fight back hard. But it hasn't happened yet. Oh, I would beg to differ, Andreas. It has happened, but it has yet to play fully out or happen according to the planner's plans. Anyway, continuing on. The funny thing is that the system starts fighting back. Those people will not differentiate between Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin, Bitcoin and Ethereum, Ethereum and Ripple, Monero and Zcash. As far as they're concerned, we're all a bunch of weirdo anarchists who are trying to help terrorists and drug lords defeat the financial order. They're not going to differentiate. They're going to backlash against all of us. And that's going to be the great uniting moment. As soon as we get attacked from the outside, everyone will circle the wagons and everyone will be friends again. You see this in divided countries where all they need is an external enemy to refocus, and suddenly they're all on the same side. That's, to some extent, sure, I would agree with that. Talking about these forces from without, how have you seen governments respond to the space, especially in North Korea? Sorry. That's funny that it's actually North America. I said North Korea. Are we seeing any growth in the right direction, or is it just pomp and pageantry? Andreas, I don't think it matters. It's all pomp and pageantry. They all want to appear hip and relevant and of the time and be pro-business or pro-innovation, and it's all bullshit. Because first of all, these systems are not yet having an effect that's big enough to start disrupting established industries, at which point we're going to start seeing governments realign, knowing where their bread is buttered, knowing who is paying the bills. And we're not the ones paying the bills, right? Actually, I would disagree with that. At that point, we're going to see some overt hostility and disinformation against us. Oh, we're already seeing that. For the time being, they're just playing the part of magnanimous regulators who are sober and considerate, but not hostile to innovation because they want the jobs. It's all pageantry. It doesn't mean anything. And so in the US, you've got an incredible amount of fragmentation because you've got 15 federal regulators and then 50 state regulators, and then all of them are screaming, I don't want this. You regulate it. And the other half are screaming, it's our domain, step out. And the same thing is happening across the world. Yeah. Continuing. Is there any government that you think is doing a good job? Andreas. Does it really matter in the end? This isn't the domain of government. The fundamental invention of governance by algorithm in a decentralized system, the first thing it disrupts is regulatory compliance. No, I would disagree with you there. It might disrupt regulatory compliance, but it doesn't stave it off entirely. It just stays in the background, waiting for a significant perch to develop within the system that it can stand on and start ordering people around. Continuing on, Andreas. It disrupts regulators before anyone else because it says, quote, we're regulating this way, so we don't need to be regulated by institution, by committee, by whatever. And people think that when I say things like that, I'm questioning their authority. I'm not questioning their authority. They have all the authority in the world. I'm questioning their ability to enforce their authority. And you're questioning whether or not there's even a place to enforce that authority. Andreas, right, exactly. And you can question all you want, dude. The architects are trying to build the framework all around you. Continuing on. So in your opinion, the space would be better off left alone to its own devices. You don't really need to find something to regulate with this. Andreas, exactly. It's already regulated. It's regulated by math. It's regulated in the most deterministic, predictable, and highly defined manner. This is a system in which the fact that it doesn't have rulers doesn't mean it doesn't have rules. It has a lot of rules, and those rules are very specific. What it doesn't have is the ambiguity of human regulation. And people need to realize that the reason we don't need to regulate cryptocurrencies is not because they don't need regulation. It's because they're already regulated by algorithm. If you want algorithmic regulation, this is the space to play. If you want human regulation, we already have that. That's not new, and in fact, that's what we're trying to fix. I look at it in a very simple way. Most of the institutions we have for governance today are fundamentally creations of the industrialized era, the Industrial Revolution. That means they're creations of the late 18th and 19th centuries. And they don't scale anymore for a planet in which the shit that was spewing in the atmosphere in one place causes a hurricane across the ocean in another place. We're too interconnected to govern as little fiefdoms in separate jurisdictions with human governance and decision making. I don't agree with that at all. Human governance and decision making is very important on a local level, because one of the things that all of your high and mighty systems don't bother to monitor is anything that humans do not include in the considerations. And humans are not very good at anticipating things and making considerations of things that are outside of their realm of concern. So things like the necessity of salmon to get to their spawning grounds in order to spawn, it doesn't really equate when you're considering water utilization. And so if you're doing water utilization decisions on a global basis, you're going to only consider the contingencies and the concerns that are actually included in your concern. And of course, the salmon spawning is not initially a concern unless, of course, somebody bothers to point it out. And even then, you're going to leave out factors that make your decision-making fuck up. Continuing on. If you try to scale the industrial era governance models, you try to simply scale them up and make bigger agglomerations, the European Union, the Russian Federation, the United States, very soon they become either corrupted, indifferent, incompetent, or too slow to make decisions because they can't scale to that size. But the problems we're facing require them to not only scale to that size, but to scale to a transnational size, which is horrifying because then it'd be one world government, and if my national government is not already working, then how bad is a transnational government going to be? When we need a different model for governance. On that point, I would agree. The Industrial Revolution will no longer fit our planet, so that's how I look at these systems. Now, once governments realize that's the game, that this is about changing the way we do governance and offering alternatives, I think we're going to have some very different responses, some pushback, some resistance. One more thing, I think we overestimate how much interest governments have in any of this. Their problems are so big that they're not related to what we're doing. The dollar has its own problems, which are enormous. That's a good transition into another question. A lot of people, and they're mainly retail investors, mind you, are looking for the next spark for the next bull run. People point to the ETF and say, quote, once we get that, we'll get institutional investors and this will flood capital into the market. Andreas, be careful what you wish for. This is exactly my point. You know, the majority of gold traded on the market today isn't actual gold. It's certificates. It's fractional reserve lending. And with ETFs and Bitcoin futures, you're inviting the same thing. Andreas, you're diluting the value. Yes, absolutely. Oh, and just to let you know, point on that, okay? Adam Beck and his liquid, same thing. Diluting the value because you're not actually transacting Bitcoin, you're transacting abstractions of Bitcoin. Continuing on. Right, you're trading contracts. So is something like an ETF or Bitcoin futures too antithetical to Bitcoin's ethos? Andreas, it's completely antithetical because what you're talking about is centralized custodian holders who give you a fraction of the rights that having your own keys gives you. They have exposure to the monetary fluctuation. You don't have any of the autonomy, empowerment, voting ability, participation ability, authority, and independent validation of transactions that you have as someone who holds the keys and uses Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency directly. This is a direct participation system. On that point, I could not agree with Andreas more. Andreas, when you're investing in a secondary market like an ETF, you're not a direct participant in this very direct participation system. You're a second-hand citizen. You're a second or third-class citizen. You're only getting one part of the rainbow of attributes of this system and capabilities. I'd also like to say that the same thing is happening while your funds are locked up in a smart contract for your fucking Lightning Network shit. Anyway, continuing on. And who has the rest? The custodian has the rest. The custodian now gets to decide which fork is the real fork, not you. The custodian gets to decide how to vote on the next soft fork decision, not you. The custodian gets to decide whether you want to switch to a different cryptocurrency or not, or how to disperse them. All of these things dilute the value proposition. Thank you again. Andreas completely negates the proposition being provided for why we should do liquid. Continuing on. Andreas. Now that doesn't mean they damage cryptocurrency. I would disagree with that. If this was about investment, then the idea of bringing in more investors would make the thing better. But this isn't about investment. This isn't an investment, it's a technology. I would disagree with that. It is an investment. It's an investment of your interest. You're investing your interest in Bitcoin by buying, selling, transacting, hodling, whatever, Bitcoin. Continuing on. And bringing more people into a technology, especially when that technology isn't ready for another influx of people, it doesn't make it better. It makes it worse temporarily, because all of the problems are magnified by a whole influx of newbies. And I would disagree with that as well. You want more participants, but you don't want just more users. You want more participants, miners. That's part of the participation here in Bitcoin, unless you've forgotten that. Continuing on, Andreas. When AOL joined the internet, AOL called it a, quote, golden moment. The internet called it Black Monday, because they dumped 3 million noobs right into the middle of our nicely defined internet, which had netiquette and common standards of behavior and useful applications, all of which broke because it wasn't ready for the scale of people, or for the new culture of people who are not trained in that culture. I do remember that period because I was one of those noobs. In a recent talk, you say that the idea of a, quote, personal bank looks ridiculous right now in hindsight because of gaps in user experience, usability, and technical gaps, and you said complexity is the greatest user vulnerability. But once we have more intuitive designs and secure applications, then we will see the adoption we've been asking for. Andreas. It's not so much that we'll see adoption at that point. It'll be possible to help people who actually need this technology. And dude, bullshit. We already have the ability to help those people. We don't need to put fucking third parties in there who are designing the software and designing also how that software functions, and thus designing our participation, our ability to participate, our level of participation. And I think that's a blind spot that Andrews kind of just skips over on quite a few things. Anyway, continuing on. Let's see. We have to remember, not everyone needs this. There is 5 to 10% of the human population that already has representative democracy, working institutions, and working banks. We're the privileged ones. We're not the primary focus. We need it long term because our democracy is eroding faster than we can save it. But we don't need it in the short term to buy coffee. And I would disagree with that too. Some of us use it as money and have for quite a long time. So in the long term, what do developers and educators need to do? What does the community need to do to guide cryptocurrency through this growth spurt? Andreas. First, recognize that not everybody needs it, and don't try to sell people who don't need it. I couldn't agree with that more. Not everybody is ready or should be part of this, right? No, I disagree with that point. I mean, I know I've evangelized a whole bunch of people. My friends got involved, and maybe they made some investments. Maybe they're happy today. Maybe they're not happy today with me. That's a double-edged sword. But the real impact of this technology is on the other 6 billion people, the unbanked, the underbanked, the politically oppressed, and it's using this as a tool that magnifies personal power, especially defensive power, to help people defend themselves against large corrupt institutions, whether state institutions or private institutions. That's the power. It's giving people freedom. Actually, it's showing people how to give freedom back to themselves. Now, not everybody needs that right now, and we're not ready to just bring 1 billion people on board a system that isn't ready to scale. No, I'm confident that we can bring 1 billion people on who are ready to participate. That would bring in your scale. Continuing on. You said not everyone needs it. Do you think that there will be a time when everyone is using cryptocurrency? Andreas. Absolutely. Do you think that that will come in the form of private currencies or nationally backed currencies? Andreas. All of the above. Every form you can imagine. Nationally backed, privately backed, government issued, privately issued. I think that fundamentally, nationally issued cryptocurrencies are business as usual. They don't change the fundamental problem. The fundamental problem is centralized control, and no government is going to issue a cryptocurrency that is not centralized. So they're just moving around the deck chairs. And they're certainly not going to release one that has a cap on supply. Andreas, right, exactly. Or one where they can't censor or control borders or do verification of identity because surveillance is more important to them. So those things will happen. They're just not particularly interesting. The thing that is interesting is the open, borderless, neutral, censorship-resistant global system or systems that give people choices even if their own government doesn't want them to happen. Bitcoin Magazine. The whole borderless thing always takes me back to Marxism. This idea that Bitcoin is borderless, it denies centralized control and gives purchasing power and voting power back to the people. And Andreas, I think people tend to reflect onto Bitcoin their preconceived politics. And that's because it has this mirror-like capability to be what you want it to be or look like what you want it to be. In the end, it's not Marxist or capitalist, it's crypto. And that's interesting because both Marxism and capitalism and all of the systems we have today were invented in the late 19th century. They are systems that are fundamentally born of the Industrial Revolution. Bitcoin is postmodern. This is something that doesn't fit into any of the existing buckets because we're making new buckets. Because this is redefining governance and political systems. So the fact that to some people it looks Marxist, to some people it looks capitalist, to some people it looks libertarian, to some people it looks anarchist, is because they are trying to slap one of their traditional labels onto it. I agree with that thesis. Your frame of reference has to be reinvented in order to label this thing. Is it an asset? Is it a bond? Is it a currency? Is it a stock? It's a cryptocurrency. And what is that? It's the new thing that isn't any of those things, but all of those things simultaneously. It has characteristics of precious metals, bonds, stocks, currencies, contracts. It has all of those characteristics, but it's not any one of those things. And I would agree with that. The map is not the territory with regard to cryptocurrency, but we can make all kinds of characterizations of it in our own little way. And there's really no way to avoid that. That's just the taint of your own perspective. And we do that with everything. So the fact that we do it with cryptocurrencies is neither new nor novel. I would agree with a lot of what Andreas has said in this article, and there are just a few things that I would disagree with. I think that, like I said, in the longer term, we're going to find that the more decentralized, diffuse the processing of the transactions is, and the more redundant the system is, the more robust it will be, the more trustable it will be. And right now, we're still figuring out the traits that are the most important. I think we'd already figured those out with Bitcoin, and shifting away from the on-chain transactions for everyone model, I think, is a mistake, because it introduces a lot of the points where third parties could put their gates in, and then we got third-party gatekeepers and trust brokers again, and then we're operating on fractional reserves again and trust, and we're no longer on-chain. We're no longer able to verify. And we're left in the same situation we were in when Bitcoin was originally created. And so it's very important to keep in mind that you do want to involve other people in your thing, because if you don't involve them, then you're not going to have miners. You're not going to have a network. And so they must have an interest. In order to appeal to them, they must have an interest in it. They must have participation. And it is with that, I want to throw back down into some music. And I do agree with Andreas on some of his basic thesis. And I think that Bitcoin is a part of this, or at least my impressions of it. And so I'm going to throw it down with a little bit of Clutch, Escape from the Prison Planet, here on Coin Metal. And that was Clutch with Escape from the Prison Planet. I would have kept going, but there was one little article that I wanted to read here. And this one kind of fits in with a little bit of Andreas' thesis concerning government and cryptocurrencies. And also a little bit of my thesis about how cryptocurrencies are more or less the mad quagmire of the 21st century. Here it is. It's on Bitcoin.com. Global cryptocurrency exchanges cut ties with Iran after new U.S. sanctions. This was authored yesterday by Jeffrey Gogo. So yes, penis. Exchanges impose restrictions, but assets not blocked. On November 5th, the U.S. announced severe economic restrictions against Iran that, with the exception of just 8 countries, cut the rest of the world off from the country's oil shipping and gas market, including its financial system. An earlier round of sanctions in May targeted Iran's currency, aviation industry, and other sectors as President Donald Trump broke away from his predecessor Barack Obama's engagement with Tehran. Measures against the financial system are expected to hinder any kind of trade with Iran. Speaking to IBENA, an Iranian news agency affiliated with the country's central bank, Mohammadi said, quote, "Some virtual currency exchanges have imposed restrictions on Iranian users, but no assets belonging to Iranians have been blocked. The measures mean that people in Iran will no longer be able to trade cryptocurrency across borders, limiting trade to a domestic market where Bitcoin is sold at a significant premium relative to the global exchange rate." It was not immediately clear which other exchanges had stopped offering services to Iranians. This will not be the first time that U.S. economic sanctions have struck at the heart of Iran's cryptocurrency industry. In July, after the first round of sanctions, Mohammadi accused Donald Trump's administration of stifling the growth of Iran's digital currency sector, claiming that the U.S. government confiscated about $6 million worth of Iranian-owned Bitcoin. He stated then, quote, "Last year, 2017, the remarkable volume of Bitcoin, which belonged to some Iranians, was confiscated due to unspecific reasons by the federal government of the United States, and the process of confiscation is still continuing." The Iranian blockchain community chairman indicated at the time that the owners of the confiscated Bitcoin were unable to take legal action against the U.S. inside Iran, as cryptocurrencies were banned in the country. The Central Bank of Iran in April banned Iranian banks from dealing in foreign cryptocurrency, citing money laundering and terrorism financing risks, but later rescinded the decision after gauging the full effect of the sanctions. Announcing the sanctions on Monday, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo warned, quote, "It should be noted that if a company evades our sanctions regime and secretly continues sanctionable commerce in the Islamic Republic, the U.S. will levy severe, swift penalties on it, including potential sanctions. I promise you that doing business with Iran in defiance of our sanctions will ultimately be a much more painful business decision than pulling money out of Iran entirely." State-backed digital currency. Iran, the world's third largest oil producer, is hoping to leverage cryptocurrencies to compensate for the expected squeeze on petrodollars arising from economic sanctions designed to cut oil sales from the country. the economy's lifeblood. Brigadier General Gholam Reza Jalali, head of Iran's civil defense organization, has talked about the, quote, great opportunities presented by cryptocurrencies and the latest indication that Tehran is developing a state cryptocurrency. Quote, cryptocurrencies can help bypass certain sanctions through untraceable banking operations, Jalali told the state media in October. He also emphasized the need for formation of a national cryptocurrency that can be used whenever necessary. I'm going to deviate from this article right there, just because I think that the initiation of a state cryptocurrency in kind of a counter to this is stupid, because you'll basically be containing yourself to whoever is willing to exchange your cryptocurrency, which is not going to be as globally diverse as Bitcoin. What you do need to do, though, is cut the restrictions of your citizens within Iran, because what you'll do then is create a safe bed in Iran for cryptocurrencies, and that will cause people who are interested in cryptocurrencies to come to Iran, which will drive the market center to Iran. This has happened in Singapore, Japan, everywhere where they've been especially vague on their regulations. That's where the interest is shifted. So, if Iran wants to get out from under the rock here, what they really need to do, instead of trying to make their own cryptocurrency, their own national cryptocurrency, which I believe will just be a waste of money and time and effort, they should be focusing on trying to enable their citizens to participate without their participation. Take a hands-off approach. Get on the horn to your fucking bank and say, hey, get the fuck off of crypto people's ass and let them bank with you. Just don't involve yourself at all. Just let them bank with you. As long as they're straight with you and they're not ripping you off, bank with them. If they're fucking with you, call us. We will stomp them into oblivion. But we want you to allow them to bank with you. If they did that alone, they'd be able to circumvent any of the impact that this fucking bullshit is having on them. Because so what? The fucking exchanges outside of Iran are cutting ties with you. What do you do then? You create an exchange in Iran that doesn't have any KYC AML bullshit. Do not enforce any of the bullshit from your central banks or whatever, and allow people all over the planet to trade with you. The interest of in taking a piece of that premium that you're experiencing within your border, which I'm sure is significant, the desire to get a cut of that will get people over this. Do we want to adhere to the fucking dictates that are being enforced with the big stick that the U.S. is waving around? I believe if you drew enough interest, the U.S. would just shut the fuck up about it and get over themselves. And it's with that I want to go ahead and close out this episode. We will be back again on Friday at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And so until then, I want y'all to trade safe. Do your homework. And watch out for your own bunghole, because nobody is going to do it for you. Thank you very much for listening. And we're going to go ahead and close it out with a little bit of Exodus, your Last Dance Lowrider, here on Coin Metal. Thank you again for listening, and you all have an excellent evening.